I don't know what's real and what's a product of my nightmares.
What about Baba?
Indian agencies keep a very tight tab on Kashmiris.
They took my passport.
It's happening again. Kina. I need to know what happened.
It is not an easy thing to relive the worst days of our lives.
They're erasing us.
It's about time I pass down this story to you.
On today's show, I speak to Arfat Sheikh, filmmaker ahead of his debut feature film, Saffron Kingdom. We discuss the history and brutal Indian occupation of Kashmir. Arfat talks about how personal tragic loss inspired him to create the film, a film about trauma and erasure of the Kashmiri experience. This is your host, Omer, and welcome to the Ozone Podcast. Assalamu alaikum, Arfat Sheikh. Welcome to the Ozone Podcast.
Walaikum assalam, Umar. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, I appreciate having you here. Maybe we can start by you telling a little bit about your background.
So my name is Arfat. I was born in Srinagar, and I grew up in 90s. And it was a time when there was a lot of stuff happening in Kashmir. There was armed struggle. Because a lot was happening, which I did not understand because I didn't have a lot of know-how when I was a little kid at that time. But I remember that it was mostly curfews. It was you couldn't really go out after 5 in the evening because everything was cordoned off by the occupying forces of India in Srinagar. A lot of bad news you would hear, like, okay, this person was killed, that person was martyred. So it was all about that and a series of massacres that happened. So I would say like the background about me, I'm a conflict kid, but then it was only until I started looking towards the West to see if I could actually go and study abroad. I studied initially in England, then came back to Kashmir for some time to work with a lot of not-for-profit organizations that would actually do a lot of these livelihood projects and entrepreneurship projects. But that is how I got into wanting to tell stories, because that gave me exposure to understand what exactly was happening. And yeah, then I moved to America wanting to tell those stories and become a filmmaker.
So I think it's important to get a little bit about the history of Kashmir. I feel like it's one of those areas in the world where people know a little bit about, but not too much. They just hear it's war torn, or it's kind of ignored a lot by the media. So what do you think, where do you think is a good starting point to learn about the history? Would it be at the partition point of Pakistan and India, or a little bit before? Wherever you think is appropriate, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how Kashmir came into creation, or what is currently modern day Kashmir.
Well, I think Kashmir has its own history, which if we need to explore, it's going to take, I think, hours and hours and days. But yeah, I mean, Kashmir in itself was an independent entity before even the partition of India, and that was one of the reasons what led to what we call as the main bone of contention between these two nuclear powers, India and Pakistan. Because when British left, it was a princely state. It was ruled by a king. And when they left, bases led to the creation of Pakistan. It was all like, okay, if you're Muslim, predominantly Muslim, there's a Muslim country for you. And if you're Hindu, even though India claimed to be a secular nation, but it was predominantly done on the basis of religion. And because of the proximity of Kashmir with Pakistan and predominantly a Muslim state, it made sense that it had to go with Pakistan. But what happened at that time, the Hindu king who was supposed to decide that what are we supposed to do, he could have also decided to stay independent. And that's where a lot of people also thought that, yeah, I mean, probably we're going to continue to stay as an independent country. But under the pressure of India, he signed what is called, quote unquote, the instrument of accession, which again is something very debatable. Like, this king also was very oppressive, was a tyrant in Kashmir, because again, he was a Hindu king, while majority of his subjects were Muslims. So he wasn't really being great to them either. And there was already an uprising that had happened in 1936 or in 1930s, wherein people were not happy with the monarchy. there. So people were not already happy with the king, but then king also thought, oh, if Kashmiris have to decide, they probably would decide because it was all but natural that they would decide to go with a Muslim country and because of the proximity with Pakistan. So a lot happened in between, wherein there's a lot of debate happening. Okay, this side did this, that side did that, but ultimately the king succumbed to the pressure and he signed what they call, quote unquote, the instrument of accession, which led India to literally occupy Kashmir. But then again, they knew that like this was contested region. That's when India and Pakistan they had like three wars over Kashmir, and during the first war that happened, the issue was taken to the UN, and that's when UN decided that okay, you gotta like conduct a referendum, which is also called a plebiscite, wherein people are going to decide what they want to do with their future, whether they want to go with India or they want to go with Pakistan. That referendum was also something that the first Prime Minister of India also publicly acknowledged. And also, I mean, there are, if you still go and look it up on Google, that you will still find videos of Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, telling his Indian nation and, of course, Kashmiris that we would hold that, whatever the decision the UN took, and we would let people decide their own future. But ultimately, they started like doing changes in their constitution to what happened in 2019, when they abrogated that special article that was put in place because it was a contested region, which meant that India could control a few things, such as security and other things, but cannot control a lot of the legislature in Kashmir because it's still a contested region. But then what they did in 2019 was something that was unilaterally done because there are stakeholders to it. One, of course, are Kashmiris themselves. Then there's Pakistan, also a big stakeholder, but it was done in such a way which was one menacing, and two, it wasn't honest. They took the support from the regional government first because then they knew that they could actually dictate their terms from Delhi and do what they do, and abrogated that piece of constitution from the Indian constitution, which was the Article 370 and 35A, which led to them illegally now literally annexing Kashmir to the dominion of India, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So the UN plebiscite, did that ever come to a vote? And if so,
No.
why did that never happen?
See, the UN had also kept certain parameters for it to happen. One was like, of course, Pakistan also had to vacate. Sort of there shouldn't be any military presence. So India had to also do the stuff. But I don't think it did not happen because India never wanted it to happen. Because now if you see the narrative, especially with the new government, the BJP government, it is all about the nation that they want to create has to be on the basis of Hindutva ideologies. And that's where the concept of Akhand Bharat also comes, which is the unification of Hindu India, which, by the way, includes the whole of Pakistan and goes up until some parts of Middle East as well, Afghanistan, which is considered as the Akhand Bharat. So now the concept is, were they being honest with that? Maybe the first prime minister was, but then they never did it. There was never like a proactive action taken for them to ask the people of Kashmir to understand that what they want to do with their future. And that was a case why it led to the armed struggle in 1990s, because there's a reason for that too, is a lot of these guys were promised, who were against the India's rule in Kashmir, especially our local leaders. They were asked like, okay, why do you want to go that route? Why are you showing dissent? You could also show dissent through a parliamentarian way, as in you become the elected members of legislative assembly in Kashmir, and then you could actually put your point across and people would listen to you because you would be representatives, and representatives from the legal point of view, or that would give you authenticity and you could directly engage with New Delhi. But what they did in 1989 was they rigged the elections because they knew that there was a lot of support for these local leaders. And what the rigging did was, that's when there was no other resort but for those leaders to take up arms, because they literally rigged, and they appointed somebody is there as an Indian. So that was the local party in Kashmir. It was Farooq Abdullah who was planted as a puppet of New Delhi, and the elections were rigged because they didn't want any local representatives to win it. And that's what led to the armed struggle throughout the 1990s. And that's when India started to get aggressive with Kashmiris, and that led to the series of massacres in 1990s, and a lot of extrajudicial killings happened. The unmarked graves, a lot of people were like disappeared. The police would come, quote unquote, security forces, Indian security forces would come knocking at your house, take men out as young as 10, 12 years old, and even older men, take them and rape the women in these villages. That's the case of Kunan Poshpora. These are twin villages, which the whole village was raped. Take the men out and then take them with them, and they never returned. And it was only until a decade ago when an investigation led to these investigators find some unmarked graves, wherein they found, okay, all these men who have been disappeared actually were killed later on, and these are the unmarked graves that they found out. It led to an investigation, but ultimately, like, of course, India has such authority over Kashmir, such control over Kashmir, that any dissent that there is, they would always quash it. There are things which are very draconian, such as the laws that they have in Kashmir. One is the AFSA, which is the Armed Forces Special Power Act, which is men can do whatever they can do, and there is no implication for them. There's no repercussions. They won't be tested in the court of law because they get the impunity to do whatever they want to do. And this is the law that they have adopted from what British did when India was a colony. Some of those draconian laws, they still exist, and they don't exist for the other parts of India, but they exist in places such as Kashmir, which they are occupying, and in some states in the northeastern part of India, where there is some sort of conflict. In 2019, we still knew there were people like, okay, Article 37 and 35A gives it a special status. It was a symbolic. Over the years, they literally made it vacuous. There wasn't enough in it, but it still was very symbolic. You couldn't buy land in Kashmir because that would have led to demographic changes. But now there's a lot happening ever since 2019. They already are issuing a lot of certificates for people to actually come into, so that they can change the whole demographic makeup of Kashmir and make it in a sort of a Hindu state. And a lot of these Hindu settlers are coming to Kashmir and buying land. It's literally very uncanny to what is happening in the world right now, especially with the Palestinian occupation. It's kind of similar in a lot of ways.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions to that. The first one, since you just mentioned the settling, what you're describing, is that similar to maybe what happened in China with Tibet, like the Han Chinese? I don't know if you're familiar with that. They came into Tibet and they wanted to change the demographics. So is that like a push by India to try to get like, a Hindu increased population there to change the demographics in case
Yeah.
there's any elections, or just to kind of decrease the strength and power of the Kashmiri local people?
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they're doing right now. I mean, they did it. I mean, it's not with just the current government, so I'm not gonna just blame them. But it's been the policy of India with their fetish with this part of the world, that is Kashmir, because they did it in 1947. There's a genocide that happened, which is called Jammu genocide. Jammu also is a region which is part of Kashmir. It's Jammu and Kashmir together, as what it was known, or still is. What happened in Jammu was also a predominantly Muslim state. So when this king, going back to 1947, when these princely states were given option to choose what they want to do with their future, this king knew that, okay, his subjects were Muslim. They're probably going to vote for who? Pakistan. And there's, of course, a strong connection. The religion is same. The proximity is, it's so close to it. People are going to go with Pakistan. What he did was he engineered a genocide. He literally, human rights agencies or the books that have been written about it, they say somewhere around 200,000 to 500,000 people were killed, and they were Muslims. It led to almost about 1 million people they fled to other parts of South Asia, and some fled to Pakistan, some fled to mainland India. That was also something that they had tried in 1947 to actually change the Muslimness of the region, which they pretty much did it, because Jammu right now is predominantly Hindu. So this is something that they have done it in 1947, and probably now replicating it again, because now if you even do a little Google search, you'll find like how many settlers are coming to India every year. And there's a lot of appropriation of our culture also happening, which is a new thing where you see these influencers on Instagram, trying to tell people like they must visit Kashmir and wearing our stuff, trying to appropriate our culture in such a way, which I think as a Kashmiri is demeaning too, because you do know that they're not doing it with the right intention. There's something that a lot of people would not understand. Okay, it's not them being, benevolent, that they want people to come to Kashmir and make it a touristy place, but it's all about them showing the control that they have over Kashmir and its people.
Absolutely. No, that reminds me of some of the things you see. I think a lot of people are more familiar with the Israel-Palestine conflict. You see a lot of Israel cultural appropriation of Arab things like Arab foods, like, hummus or falafel, and they call it Israeli falafel, where it's really been an Arab thing for centuries. It sounds like the similar things are happening in Kashmir, but we wouldn't know about it. Now, you talked about the 90s and the mass torture and rapes and killings and disappearing of children and adults as well. Was that perpetrated by the Indian Army, or was it done by like paramilitary settler type forces, or a combination? Because again, people have some parallels with the West Bank, where a lot of the destruction is done by the settlers, but it's kind of green lighted by the IDF and they participate as well. Who did the atrocities in Kashmir in that time?
The atrocities were committed by the Indian. I mean, I'll call them as a collective Indian occupying forces. So paramilitary, exactly, but of course it had different wings, which was one was the Central Reserve Forces, which is the CRPF, you call them, and then there was Border Security Force also. They were brutal. Then they have like different wings, and all of them actually, it was a combined effort, and also those who actually worked for the local police, because ultimately like somebody who actually worked for the local police, they were also coerced or forced into becoming part of the whole operation. So if there was a raid that would happen, they would have the local police also there, but then you again have to understand who planted those local police, who gives them the orders. It was an Indian paramilitary forces, and I really cannot call them a security force because the name in itself is so problematic, because a security guy is a person who's gonna make you feel secure and give you security. That's why I mean I always have to kind of reframe it in such a way wherein for me they are the occupying forces, and then of course there are collaborators also. They come in different shapes and forms, but again they have their own story too, so I'm not going to be really going into that tangent. It doesn't just happen by themselves. There are other people who have vested interest in it. So I think it's more complicated than I probably could explain it in just in one podcast.
So one thing we didn't talk about, I think you kind of alluded to, is what is Kashmir's current status? And just for a background, maybe you can describe it a little bit better. But I think Jammu and Kashmir that you're referring to, and maybe Ladakh, is occupied by India. There's a part in Pakistan which India calls Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and Pakistan will call it Azad Kashmir. And then there's a portion that Chinese have control. Would you consider all of this to be like part of Kashmir? And is it the same ethnicity and language, or are there some differences in culturally as well?
I mean, all of it is, yes, Kashmir, depending on like how you want to bifurcate. But ethnically, yeah. I mean, if you're somebody from Valley, which is predominantly what is occupied by India, then yeah, you're Kashmir, it's a collective term. Then there's Kashmir as well, just the Kashmir Valley. So all of this, what you mentioned, is Kashmir. And of course, like officially you can call it Jammu and Kashmir. But then there's Kashmir Valley. Going back to your question of like, are there like different ethnicities and different languages? There are a lot of languages that are spoken. There are Gujars, there are Bakarwals, there are other languages other than Kashmiri is also spoken. I think all of this is a unified entity. And that is what is Kashmir. And yes, there's part that Pakistan controls, and there's part with India that India controls. Is the part that China has taken is inhabitable, because China is more about resources than people. India is the one that has most of it, I would say.
What is the current climate in Kashmir? I know in the 90s was pretty bad, but even now you're talking about some demographic changes. Is it for Kashmiri right now? How safe is it? Are there still chances of being killed or raped, or is it just more being arrested for free speech, or is it pretty free? Like, what is the current status?
Like 90s was very brutal, and 90s was like, of course, like I said, I was a little kid, so I mean a lot of the stuff, my memories are like, okay, there's a bomb blast that happened here, There's like people who were killed, there are people who were like taken, a lot of those memories. But I think right now it's more dangerous, I would say, right now. And the reason I'm saying this is because there isn't any news coming from Kashmir, because there's so much control on the narrative. Because you're a Kashmiri, so of course you speak to your people, you get to know, okay, this has happened, but it never makes it to the headline, you know. But in 90s, even though there were things that were happening, it still was reported. I wouldn't say like internationally when they did the massacres in 90s. A lot of this stuff, you know, they control it in such a way that you still do not have a lot of news, international news channels going there. And but you had local newspapers that would talk about it. I mean, you had even some Indian newspapers that would talk about it. But now is a case wherein like nothing comes out. They have muzzled the voices, and it become more dangerous because what they do now is you wouldn't know, and it could be even worse than what was happening in 1990s. And plus now they have the full control. Before they were answerable to a lot of these stakeholders, but now I think with the weakening of Pakistan also, there isn't like really much, there isn't anybody questioning what's happening in Kashmir. And that's not that I'm comparing our struggle with the Palestinian struggle. What they're going through is atrocious. There's also a hope that there is a huge, you know, solidarity movement that's going around the world with the Palestinian conflict, what Israel is doing there. But there isn't much information available of Kashmir, when there is a lot of similarities between what's happening. And I think at times it's even worse. I don't know if you know about this. Albit is the company that produces arms and ammunition that are used and tested in Kashmir, the same ones that then used in Palestine. So there's a link, growing friendship between Israel and India. The arms deal that they have, then the port that they're building in Israel, in occupied Palestine. I actually shouldn't be calling it Israel at all. You know, with the help of the Indian graced businessman Adani, who has a lot of cases against him. So I think, yeah, all of that it's alarming, and I think right now it's worse than it was in 90s. I would say that. I mean, I'm sure that there would be people. You know, I've had lived experience in 90s. I'm not there right now. I'm away, but I know there's this constant fear that has been created that, oh, you can't really speak, and because I come from the field of media, I know that people are not ready to speak, and they tell me stories what's happening, and nobody is even ready to report it, even locally. So that makes it, you know, I don't know how would you call it, but it's very scary.
So I know this is a loaded question because there's no easy answer, but in a perfect world, for example, we talked about Israel and Palestine a little bit. I think people would want like an independent Palestinian state, whether it's one state or two state. What would be the ideal solution from a Kashmiri perspective or your personal perspective? I know you can't speak for everybody in terms of what's the best. Would you want a UN vote where the people can decide whether they want to be part of India, Pakistan, or independent?
See, the best solution lies with the people of Kashmir. I think that you have to understand that they are the stakeholders to it. It's their land, it's them. And when I say them, it does not just mean that I'm talking about Kashmiri Muslims. Even talking about those who were there as, you know, Kashmiri Pandits. I think you have to, I think referendum is the answer. I mean, I can't really speak for anybody, you know, and I can't really tell you like what is good for us. Is being independent good for us? Being with India definitely is not, because of we are living that experience, and it's not a good experience. They don't consider as part of them, you know, in their own narrative, even if they say we are the integral part of India, which is BS. I'm sorry to use that word, but it is. But I think you have to empower the people. You have to give them that right, that agency to decide what they want to do. I mean, it's not as complicated as it's being made, you know, just give people that right without doing these little gimmicks, not being honest, changing the demographics, making sure that Hindus come there and all of that. And then you'll be like, okay, now you vote. No, you have to give the indigenous Kashmiris the chance to tell what they actually want. And it's so simple, just an election. And you know, like India conduct a massive elections when they have to decide who the prime minister of India is going to be. For India and for UN and Pakistan or all the stakeholders to come up with an election to just do it in Kashmir to understand that what they want, I think it's very easy. I mean, that's going to solve the problem. I'm not going to speak on behalf of Pakistan. I'm not going to speak on behalf of India. I'm definitely not. And independent Kashmir, yeah, personally, maybe yes, but I don't know if that's what my people want. You know, we have not been heard, you know, our voices have been muzzled. And I think that's the only way we would know what we want to do with our future.
Do you recommend outsiders, meaning non-Kashmiris, to visit Kashmir? Is it something like you want people to see what it's like, what the struggle is like, or is it more of kind of a boycott thing, like we should avoid it until India makes changes? Is there kind of a thought process on that, or that's not really an issue?
Like there's already like a lot of this perspective being created by Indian media, like everything is okay because they want to sell a perception that ever since what happened in 2019 when the abrogation of these articles happened, that Kashmir has transformed into a new Kashmir where everything is okay, people are enjoying and everything. That's a perception being created through using tourism as a tool. And of course, Bollywood too, which has played a significant role in vilifying us as people. I don't know, like yes, you would want to go, you would want to see what you want to see and understand and talk to people. Why not? But I don't, if you're going with an intention to understand what the conflict is, who we are, yes, it's a beautiful place. Of course, nobody's going to take that away from Kashmir. Yeah, you can go, you can find out yourself, but asking me if it is okay, it is safe, I don't think it is safe.
That's
It's not safe. See, a lot of these guys, even Bollywood, if they have to go and shoot there, the whole roads and the whole community is evacuated first. And there's so much heavy presence of military when they even shoot what they shoot in Kashmir. So I don't know what you would deem that. Is that security necessary if everything is okay? And still, you still have like, about 1 million occupying forces in Kashmir. If it was safe, would you have 1 million occupying forces in a region which is just occupied by, I think, 10 million people? An occupying armed force for every 10 Kashmiris or 6 Kashmiris. I don't know the statistics, but it is over 1 million forces in Kashmir. So I don't know. I mean, it's a very tricky question. Yes, I would see. I mean, if you ask me personally the same question without any bias, would I want to go to Palestine and visit? Yes. I would want to see what my brothers are going through and understand, be and understand that culture, and then be part of their the collective effort. Yes, because my intentions are that, but not to prove okay, it's everything is okay. And if I go there, so yeah, depending on what your intentions are, yeah, please go. I mean, you got to be careful and go. But yeah, if you're going from the perspective of promoting it as a tourist whatever, then yeah, I don't think your intentions are right then, because it's not all about the beauty that you see, but there is a lot of heart, and that heart is bleeding.
you're a filmmaker. Tell me about that and like why did you choose that route of occupation?
Yeah, that was again one of the reasons when I started working for not-for-profits in Kashmir when I came back from England. I already was doing a lot of media stuff and I started off as a radio jockey. It was meaningful too in a way wherein I had a direct connection with the audiences and I could feel like, okay, how powerful this storytelling as a tool is. Until when I went to England and came back and I worked for these not-for-profit organizations, which had a lot of wonderful projects trying to empower the youth in Kashmir, especially though, and I wouldn't say like especially those who were, who had something to do with the conflict, because everybody in Kashmir you go has been affected by it in one or the other way. So you wouldn't find like a family or a person who hasn't been affected directly or indirectly. So then everybody had a story, and of course, like my projects would mean that I had to do like like a project documentary where I had to show like how this project is actually helping these people. But then there was an underlying, emotion also, like how they have suffered. Some of these individuals had their parents killed, some had their brothers killed or had disappeared, or they never returned. Police had like taken them and they'd never returned. So I felt it was such a, okay, there's nothing out there that tells their story. And because I had personally also suffered, what happened to my father also, but then that wasn't like, that didn't come as an awakening for me. I was still like not somebody who was so learned about what was happening in Kashmir when my father's thing happened, because my father was, I mean, he was murdered by India. It didn't occur to me that time, like, it was happening to so many others, because my dad was a musician. He was popular. So when this happened, he did make it to like, the headlines, headlines in BBC and all these, big outlets. But then when I started working there and I saw like, okay, there are like people who have actually gone through far worse than I have. and there isn't anybody listening to that. And that's when I always had this inclination to become the voice of my own people. And I knew I have the agency to do that because I am a Kashmiri. It's not somebody else telling my story. Then I decided, okay, let me just do. So did like a lot of project documentaries there and understood the stories, understood like these different people who come from different regions within Kashmir. And I knew that I have to get an outlet, but I can't really do that. I mean, they're in Kashmir because it's heavily monitored, and any dissent, any form of dissent or art form is persecuted. So that's when I applied for a master's program here in the US to film production. And that was actually my way of coming to the US through education because it wasn't that I wanted to actually go to a film school. I mean, of course, it helped. I mean, I'm not saying it did not, but I already was making project documentaries. But then when I came to the US through education, it kind of opened my eyes to a lot of other stuff, like how you could make use of technology. You don't have to be in Kashmir to create something. So yeah, that's when I decided, okay, like now I need to find an investor to tell these stories. But I was lucky to find people who had similar, they also wanted people to know about Kashmir, and so got in touch with some people, and they were like, "Yeah, let's do it," and that's where I am. So that's how Saffron Kingdom came into being.
So that's a pretty powerful story that you mentioned that your father was murdered. Were you living in Kashmir at that time, or was that after you had moved to the West?
No, I was living in Kashmir. I was living in Kashmir. I was 17 years old. I was living in Kashmir at that time. I mean, he was traveling in on a train from Jammu to Delhi, and there was a lot of stuff that was happening those days. It was early 2000 and 2003 it was actually. They didn't know like okay, it was going to make it to headlines and everything. Then we got to know there were like a lot of harassment happening, especially when these trains would go through Punjab. A lot of these Kashmiris would get harassed because nobody would hear anyone's cries, but it was only until that case came into, it went in media, and because he was popular, so people started like talking about it, and then we got to know there was a lot happening. So that case kind of like gave others the voice. But then again, it was like again like how you were represented in the media at that time also, which was not always correct. It was a lot of assumptions happening. Okay, he must have fallen off the train. He must have gone actually to smoke the cigarette. Oh, and maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was that. So there were like a lot of assumptions being happened, and that's what I thought. Like journalism also is like it was sensationalizing the whole thing, the whole emotion, and not understanding like okay, there's a family, there's a community that's grieving, and we weren't given that opportunity to grieve also because it just became a more of a public spectacle than it was more of a personal loss, and loss to Kashmir also because his contributions to art has been immense, and especially in the 90s when a lot of stuff wasn't going great.
So you alluded to Saffron Kingdom, and we're going to talk about that. That's your upcoming movie. Before we talk about that movie, is this your first film, or have you done other films before that? And if so, what other projects have you worked on?
I've done a lot of work for not-for-profit, like as in project documentaries. I have produced and directed a lot of them, but then it is my first feature film. I've done shorts also, but as a feature film, yes, it is my first feature film.
Okay, so what is Saffron Kingdom?
I know you've been looking for it. Your Abaji's journal. It's about time I passed down his story to you.
It's okay. He had an episode earlier today. He was so angry with me. And he had every right.
Mama, I'm almost 15. I want to know what's going on.
We've been through so much. And what your mother survived, most can't even fathom.
I'm already seeing something in your opening statement. It's missing you.
I'm afraid if I dig any deeper, I'd be putting both Mafa and Shabir in danger.
Think of all the families that have been destroyed in Kashmir because their relatives decided to go public.
This could be our only chance to have our voices heard. And I can't get any of you to talk about something that happened over 25 years ago.
So we're gonna keep looking for Baba, right?
Nobody can stop us.
Well, it's about a lot of stuff. One, it is like it is an effort to let people know that okay, there is a place called Kashmir wherein people have also been displaced. So it's a story about displacement. It's a story about a family. It's a story about intergenerational trauma. It's a story about resilience. And I think it has elements of all of these things put together. So it talks about a family that was displaced, why they were displaced in the first place, and goes back into the 90s to understand, okay, there was this massacre that happened that, led to some of the family members to move to America. Until then they do a little bit of digging to understand that what exactly happened. And it was also important, like I said, since 2019, when the abrogation of article happened, there's a lot of erasure of our history happening. And I thought it was important for us to bring it back into the public memory. So yeah, Saffron Kingdom kind of tackles all of that. I mean, of course, you can't really tell the whole thing about Kashmir in just 90 minutes, but we've tried our best, and I've been lucky to find the cast and crew. I mean, I had challenges. I didn't have people who could speak Kashmiri. I didn't have Kashmiri artists. One, there isn't like an industry, and those who are here as diaspora are also, fearful that, okay, they wouldn't be let by India to go to Kashmir if they ever want to visit, if they be part of this film. So I had like those challenges, but it just, that challenge turned into an opportunity. It opened it up to other communities. My film is proudly like, all the minorities you would talk about here in America, they've come together to tell the story. So that's why it makes it even more powerful. So proud of the cast and crew that did what they did. I was lucky within a short span of time to even shortlist people who played different roles, and they did such a commendable job. Like my lead, Diana Arras, she's Aramean, which is again an ancient heritage. She draws from what those guys have gone through, like that community has gone through, being a third generation survivor of genocide. I have actors who come from diverse backgrounds, some Persian, Egyptian, Kurdish guy who also was displaced, and because of what was happening in Iran at the time, and he's a Persian American, has his story also, and everybody, it kind of resonated with everyone. But the amazing thing about it was like nobody knew about Kashmir. It was like nobody knew. They were like, okay, what is it? For them now to understand it and become part of this storytelling in itself is a great example of how solidarity sometimes works. You had like each community come together to tell the story. I had to also be mindful about people I'm showing in the film. I could only show a certain complexion. You have Black folks also behind the camera helping you. You have, of course, Latinos helping you. And Latinos could really pass for us. We literally have the same skin tone as well. So a lot of these Latinos also were cast. And then Middle Eastern people. So a lot of these people came together to tell the story, which I think is amazing. All these minorities and even white folks to come and understand, okay, I mean, we didn't know anything about it. So it kind of like created that atmosphere, which I think is what we strive for, everybody to come together to tell them, hey, there is this part of the world wherein there's been a problem that has been persisting for so long, and we don't really know about it. So this film also gives an opportunity for people to learn about Kashmir, understand what the problem is, and probably do their own, due diligence and research about it and talk about it, so that people know, okay, there is this part that is also suffering, and we need to come together and do something for it.
I've only seen the trailer, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the full film. Where was this filmed? Because in the trailer, it looks like pretty authentic, wherever location. It looks like Kashmir. I don't know where you actually filmed it, and how did you make it look like that? Or
there's a variety of techniques. Thank you. One was like, of course, we had amazing designers, set designers, art director. She did a wonderful job. The set designers did a wonderful job. But like the exteriors are actually the Kashmir, because, I had to also somehow get in touch with a Bollywood company, which is so ironic, a media company in Bombay. and I sent them because I needed these shots and I had to use the same cinema camera that I was going to use here so that the shots match. So I had them send there just to do the exteriors. Of course, I couldn't do interiors because interiors is hard to do because you need to have your actors go there. So just got the exteriors. Everything interiors that you see is all my set designers, and even there's an element of visual effects also because you see the massacre scene. Although the surroundings are real, but the bridge was created by set designers. Then there is the mixing of that happened through CGI or visual effects. So it's a lot of stuff that actually went into this film.
Well, one thing I know is like when you do timepieces, it's pretty expensive to set
Mm.
up different eras. Limited people I know in the film industry. Like, was it a difficult endeavor to produce because of the cost, and how did you get funding for a project like this that might be considered, like an activist project of sorts?
It did. I mean, it would have been hard if I didn't have community support. I mean, by community support, I mean like this one individual who's the executive producer of this film, Dr. G. Meir, and he was the one like who actually always understood the power of cinema and then how we don't have any representation, and that's the reason. That was one of the ways of me to pitch that idea to them also. Like, okay, you guys are doing a lot of advocacy for Kashmir, but we do not have a cinematic representation. You could then have to draw parallels also, like how cinema has also helped the Palestinian cause, because a lot of people now watch Palestinian films to understand what's exactly happening. And with us, it was even worse because how Bollywood is being used to vilify us is like it's another level. Like every film that comes out of India that becomes a huge sensation has to do something with Kashmir. Okay, the terrorists live in Kashmir. I think a few decades ago it was just Pakistan. Like Pakistan was the antagonist in their film, but now it has turned into like Kashmiris. Then you had Kashmir Files, which literally vilified us. And then that film did so much business for the filmmaker, and that filmmaker is not even a Kashmiri. So it's not being told from like a Kashmiri filmmaker who's telling a story of himself, but it was somebody from India who made a film talking about Kashmiri Pandits and in such a convoluted manner that it just vilified us further. And I remember if there were cinemas when this film was played, because there were these clips that were being shared on social media, you would see like the people who are watching this film towards the end of the film, they all started slogans of how we should go to Kashmir and rape their women. That's the kind of like atmosphere these films can create, and then to further vilify us as people, like I said. And Bollywood has been instrumental. Bollywood has been the one of the main tools of occupations that India uses to manipulate its own audiences so that they can justify the inhuman treatment or the atrocities and the war crimes that are being committed in Kashmir. So Bollywood is an instrument.
So one of the things you mentioned is the actors were not Kashmiri, and it was kind of a challenge, but they kind of learned on the fly what Kashmir was about. Is the film in English or is it subtitled?
It's English. See, again, like I had to be very careful. Like I said, I mean, you can't really have your actors speak Kashmiri authentically, and the whole movie is Kashmiri. So I mean, it was hard. That was one of the reasons, because it's a diasporic story, because it starts here in the U.S. It was easy to convince the audience. Okay, they live in America. I mean, although they're Kashmiris, they live in America. So, but then when it goes back into the time in 90s, and which is I think around 18 to 20 minutes of the film, it goes into 90s in Kashmir to kind of for the family to understand when they're kind of digging what really happened that led to the displacement. That's when it goes Kashmiri. Yeah, I mean that's when my actors, I should name them. I think it's like Laura Lopez from Venezuela, Ahmed Ghafouri, he's a Kurdish guy, Kurdish American. They did an amazing job. I remember like I had a couple of Kashmiris on set on the day that they were shooting them, and then the Kashmiri guy started speaking Kashmiri to Ahmed, thinking that he is actually a Kashmiri because that's the way he actually spoke or memorized his lines in Kashmiri. So I think the 20 minutes, yeah, they were like around, I think I would say like altogether 8 pages in the script, if that makes sense, is Kashmiri. Yeah, rest of it is in English. And but of course that part also has been subtitled. There's a bit of Urdu also, because there's this huge influence of Urdu in Kashmir because, of course, like we're part of the subcontinent, and then the influence of Urdu literally giants, poets such as Allama Iqbal or Mirza Ghalib and others has been huge, and I think we have a bit of that too, but it's not a lot.
Interesting thing is the name Saffron Kingdom. The word saffron, and sometimes you hear it associated with the BJP. I don't know if that's true or not. I think what is saffron and why this name, and is my assumption incorrect?
No, the name, I mean, we did a lot of there were a lot of discussions on the titling of this film. And the writer who initially was commissioned to write this film after we got her in touch with people who she interviewed, the survivors from the massacre and those who have been displaced. She came up with this name. And the moment she said Saffron Kingdom, I was like, wow, yeah, it is Saffron Kingdom. Maybe, I mean, of course, she had her own reasons, but for me, it was like it is so layered. One is like there's saffronization also happening in India, and the concept of saffronization, which is tied to Akhand Bharat, the unification of Hindu India, cannot be completed without the annexation of Kashmir, which is exactly what is happening right now, illegal annexation of Kashmir. And I thought it was such a powerful, and saffron actually is produced in Kashmir. So the whole film is about us trying to reclaim the narrative. And I thought, okay, saffron is ours. It's not all about saffronization or the Saffron Hindu Brigade. It is saffron, a spice that is indigenous to Kashmir. And this film is also trying to reclaim our narrative. It is debunking the narratives that Bollywood is peddling. I thought this title resonates in so many ways than one can think of. So yeah, there were so many layers to the title, and I was like, okay, yeah, we're gonna go with Saffron Kingdom.
So one thing I didn't clarify, I think we just kind of alluded to that you're the filmmaker, but what is your role? You're the director.
I directed the project, I produced the project, so I'm the director and producer, and I co-wrote some of the stuff in the film. So yeah, I'm the co-writer, but also, of course, the producer and director.
I know you mentioned that you were involved in some documentaries earlier for nonprofits. Why did you choose cinema over documentary? Was it because of the power of cinema, or it was just maybe difficult to access people within Kashmir? What was your reason?
Accessing people is always going to be difficult. Like, even though you do want to make something, even if you have good connections in Kashmir, it is always going to be like there's a threat of persecution. So people are not going to come on camera. It's very hard, especially right now, like I said and explained. But making cinema was like it's more, people lean more towards a feature film than you see a documentary. There's still, like, the traction on the cinema. It's purely like I wanted people to actually know the story, and I thought a lot of this stuff, like I said, how do I get it back into the public memory? Film is such a powerful tool, and it gives you so much independence and flexibility that you could really create certain events that have been erased, from your books and whatnot, but you could do that in cinema, and people are more interested in actually understanding. And this way, I could humanize our own narrative. So, a documentary could also have been made on the same issue, but then how it affected a family, to see them, to see the reenactment, I think it leaves a lasting impact. I would say as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I think there's roles for both. I'm definitely interested in the cinema aspect. Prior to our podcast, I watched a couple of documentaries on Kashmir, and they were like produced maybe in the 90s, early 2000s, maybe. So I feel like there's also a role for a really high quality documentary, because a
Yeah.
lot of the documentaries content is excellent, but I feel like the production quality really needs to be top notch to resonate
Yeah.
with people.
I agree. I mean, we are also going to be, I mean, it's not that with Daffodil Studios, that's a studio that I'm part of. The whole idea is to actually create more work, and it doesn't matter. It can be a documentary too. We actually have a documentary in production right now. It's the last stages of production. It's called Whispers of the Valley. Again, is a village where all the men were taken and have disappeared, and it's actually has the highest concentration of what you call as quote unquote half widows. They're called half because they never know if their husband's been killed, because they never return. So that documentary is also coming up soon, and it would go to the festival circuit before it would be, before it would come out for the audiences.
One of the things you mentioned is it was difficult to get Kashmiri actors because of the fear of reprisals, which is very understandable, especially if someone is living there and they could be targeted by the police or the military. I know you're quite outspoken, obviously, in terms of the content and making films. Is that a concern for yourself?
Of course it is, especially because of what India is able to do with the transnational repression. And it has come out in public what they did in Canada with the Khalistani movement leaders, or reports here in the US are very disturbing and alarming. But at the same time, I mean, I also believe that I've been, like I said, that there are too many voices that have been muzzled, and there has to be somebody who can actually, is not fearful. I mean, I don't know how to kind of answer that. Of course, my mother is worried about me, and we do have a history also, as in terms of like, what has happened to my father. I think if you don't speak up, you don't expect change, and there has to be somebody who has to speak up. And I think I didn't pick up arms. I pick up cinema, to tell my story. And I think that's how I show dissent, and that's how I want to create awareness, and that's my way of defiance and resistance. So of course, resistance is always going to be, it's not always pretty, but yeah, I mean, I've signed up for it, and let's see. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all up to Allah. There is that sense that, yeah, you got to be careful, because I had social medias which were open. Some I had to close down, and some I had to make private, because ever since the trailer started getting traction, there was a lot of hate that I got, on online too. But then I was like, okay, I mean, I knew this is not going to go down well with a lot of people who wouldn't want us to tell our stories. But like I said, it is what it is. I mean, I can't really change it, but I have, I am a Kashmiri, and a Kashmiri who wants to tell a story, and nobody's going to stop me.
I really prefer independent films like you're making. I always find them to be more inspiring, better quality product. I feel like a lot of the actors who take those projects choose them because of the content, and so the quality is good. Unfortunately, I think as you described, Bollywood and equally I would say Hollywood are quite problematic in that they push a lot of mainstream propaganda against, poorer nations and stuff like that, and they hide the truth. So I'm really happy with the way you're going about it with this film. To me personally, I find that very interesting. Where can we find this film? I think maybe it's on some festival circuits. I haven't seen it myself. Where is this film right now, and when can we anticipate being able to watch it?
Right, this film is right now doing rounds in festivals. We haven't really publicly screened it as yet. It only has been reviewed by the festival committee, and it has won awards, awards we didn't expect. Response from the festival circuit has been very encouraging, and it still is going to different festivals. But we would have our first public screening in North Carolina on March 1st. I don't know if you're going to release this podcast before or after, but on March 1st in North Carolina, because it's a film festival, and we chose it because of the proximity with a lot of our cast and crew members haven't seen the film, and it would be easier for them to travel there. And we wanted to acknowledge that, and we're also getting an award as a best feature film at Wake Forest Film Festival in North Carolina. So we thought that would be a good activity for all the cast and crew to get together after a year and then celebrate the success of the film, because it's really doing well in the in the film festival circuit. But coming back to when would we release it publicly, we want to also do like some screenings in every city and also internationally before we put it out on a streaming service. We are speaking to streaming, distributors are ready to put it on a streaming service, but we want to wait. We want to actually, at the end of the day, we can just put this film on any streaming service, but we also want that this film should initiate conversations, because if we have screenings wherein we go and we present the film, it gives us an opportunity to talk also. So I think that's the campaign that the production company wants to run. They want to go city by city, release the film, have like these exclusive screenings happening, and then we move on to a streaming service when it will be available for everybody to watch.
Well, that sounds exciting. People that are listening, if they want to watch, is there any website where they can check where screenings are going to be happening?
Yeah, one is our website, daffodilstudios.org, DAFFODILSTUDIOS .org is the website. We will update everything there. But if you also want to follow us on Instagram, because we constantly continue to put content out there and any announcements that we have. So our Instagram is Saffron Kingdom Film. You can go on there and follow us, and we will keep you updated. You can also see some behind the scenes, how we created the scene and who all have been involved in the film. So yeah, give us a follow on there, and then we keep everybody who's interested in wanting to know where this film is, we'll keep people updated if it's in your city. I mean, it would be on Instagram too. So yeah.
How about yourself personally? Is there anywhere you want people to follow you online, or is it just those your organizations that you prefer?
I mean, if people are interested in following me, yeah, I mean, I have an Instagram account too, which is Arfat_A_Sheikh. So Arfat is ARFAT, then underscore, then letter A, then underscore, then SHEIKH. That's my Instagram.
Is there anything about Kashmir or the film that I didn't ask that you'd like to say, or did we cover what you wanted?
I think you covered pretty much everything, but I want to say to everybody that give this film a watch. And if you don't want to watch this film, but just look up what's happening in Kashmir. It's important that we all know about it and also raise our voices. And if you live in America or anywhere, whoever is listening, speak to your representatives. Tell them like, hey, the situation in Kashmir is, it needs your attention, so that they also could speak about it, because they have the authority and they have the representation. So I think even if you make a single call to your, representative, that makes a difference, because then they get to know about Kashmir. Because like I said, when I started this film, I had to even explain what Kashmir is. Is it a thing, a place, or something to eat? So I had to literally make people aware of everything, which is okay. But hey, I mean, it always starts somewhere. And I think that could be the least one can do. And talk to people and tell them about who we are.
Well, thanks for spending the time and highlighting about what's going on in Kashmir. As I said, I feel like there needs to be more attention to that. It's been kind of lost in the news and over time, especially with India becoming a little bit more powerful. I feel like that news is a little suppressed. And also, I'd encourage everyone to watch the movie when it becomes available.
Thank you so much, Omar.
That's all for today's show. Thank you for listening. Be sure to check out Saffron Kingdom at a screening near you or in a streaming service in the future. Please remember to like, subscribe, and give positive ratings to the show so others can find it. Until next time, I'm out.